So once again, I want to talk about Life is Strange double exposure. Now, I've been sort of wondering, I've been reflecting, if you will, trying to come up with a topic when it comes to this video, because there are certainly many out there, and I have noticed that the main theme of most of them is, where is Chloe? Which is obviously the biggest question there is for Life is Strange fans, the original game fans, maybe not as much to maybe new people who would want to play the game. So I sort of rewatched the gameplay, I sort of rewatched the interviews, bits of the live stream that I maybe haven't really caught before. That ultimately led me not to actually trailer analysis of whatever, it led me to the final scene of Life is Strange. So to me, personally speaking, saving Chloe. I rewatched the whole saving Chloe sequence just to sort of get a grip of how much is at stake, and then I rewatched Life is Strange 2 bits when David discussed Max and Chloe briefly, and that led me to thinking that the main question of Life is Strange double exposure and the biggest challenge for Deck 9 WoW Edit is not exactly answering a question, where is Chloe? I think answering a question, where is Chloe, could have a simple answer. She could be doing something else. They're adults now. This could be a job related thing. They could have broken up, which is something that I will never be on board with, but yeah, that's an option that they could have gone for somehow. They could have realized that maybe the implications of the first game's ending were too great. Anything of that nature. But I feel like the biggest question there is actually how to navigate lack of Chloe. Because I sort of think that despite the fact that they shied away from introducing two different games for those of us who saved Chloe and those of you who sacrificed her, they are still creating two different games in a way. Because whatever you did by the end of the game, it's gonna have very different implications, and it's gonna be two different people in Life is Strange double exposure. The main protagonist is Max, but it's a Max with very different experiences, and I feel like it really needs to be acknowledged if they want to make a game that's actually in depth, and if they want to create a game that's sort of respecting the first one. We can focus on the mystery, we can focus on who's the killer, we can focus on new powers that belong to Max, new powers that I will sort of discuss in another video, and perhaps how they differ from the first game. We can focus on the killer search, the killer hunt, and what led to apparently new best friend Safi's death. However, I feel like narrating trauma is a whole other thing. Life is Strange event happened in 2013. Life is Strange 2 events happened in 2016. And Life is Strange double exposure is set in 2023, which gives us 10 years between the first game and this one, as well as 3 years between the first game and the second game. In the first one, Max is 18 years old, and in the second one, she's 21 years old. Now, if you saved Chloe, then in the second game, David Madsen does bring it up. He says that they're on good terms. He says that they came over to visit. Sean can find this picture of Max and Chloe together. That means that ever since they took off, they've been together all the time, all these 3 years, as far as we know. There was no indication when it comes to their falling apart for whatever reason. Now, assuming Chloe's alive again, in 2023, Max is alone in the Calden University. She does have Chloe Price's photo in her wallet. Now, some people noticed that in this one shot of the gameplay, you can actually see different type of a photo that sort of suggests that there are two people there, which again indicates that what we have seen so far was maybe a 90% part of the sacrifice Chloe ending. So we were watching Max, who sort of moved on and who's naturally without Chloe because Chloe is not alive. But for those of us who did save Chloe, we would have a picture of both of them in the wallet. I'm gonna assume that that's true. It does sound very probable, which means that Chloe is there, which means that 10 years later we are still hanging on to that photo. And if we want to follow Don't Nod's canon, Max and Chloe did spend 3 years together after the events of the first game. Now, what happened in the remaining 7 years? That's the big question, and I feel like that's the biggest challenge for Deck 9, because they're gonna have to narrate Max, who's technically the same character. She does feel like the same character. I actually appreciate the fact that they created her Max-like. I'm sure Hannah Tell's appearance makes the biggest difference there is, and also watching the interviews, she just seemed very confident in her performance and in the game overall, which can give us some hopes when it comes to the game. But it's still two Maxes. On one hand, you have Max who sacrificed Arcadia Bay. Everyone died, including Chloe's mother, Warren, but she did save Chloe as she promised to do. Now, I strongly believe that this is the right ending, but I also know that some of you guys pick the other one, and for those of you who did, you're also gonna have a different Max in the game. You're gonna have Max who has to struggle with the fact that she sacrificed her best friend, her partner or girlfriend or whatever you want to call it, but clearly the most important person in her life is gone, is dead because of her decision, ultimately. I mean, she didn't grab a gun and shoot her, but still the implications are there. These are two different protagonists, and I really want Deck 9 to sort of notice that when creating this game. I realized that we might not really have time to properly focus on Max's trauma, whatever it might be, but still her inner monologue that will be there for Sutton in the game, the bits and pieces left and right. We sort of need to acknowledge what happened, and it needs to be done respectfully. For example, let's say that you sacrificed Chloe, then 10 years passed. You probably are sort of over it. I mean, I wouldn't really expect her to grieve forever, but surely we cannot pretend that it didn't happen. And if there's actually a romance option for Max, because I believe that they did mention that there's a romance option. I'm not certain if they specifically said that it's for Max, but I imagine it is. Then it would be hard for me to imagine that she'd sort of jump into the dating pool, assuming that she hasn't before, without any implications, without giving it any thought, without thinking of Chloe, also assuming that she actually dated Chloe, because it's also a whole other layer. I'm assuming that if we're giving a choice in the game early on, as they mentioned, to either bring up Chloe's death or the fact that she's alive but the city got destroyed, I'm assuming that we'd also have an option and we'd sort of settle whether we actually dated her or not. And if we do, that also casts a whole different shadow on the story itself, which I hope would be sort of noticed by Don't Not, Deck 9. So while of course we have to be sort of told where is Chloe, assuming that she's alive, where is Chloe at the moment, if we're sort of still together, or have we possibly drifted apart, which I imagine could happen. I hope it won't happen to my Max and to my Chloe, because I clearly want them to be still together. That's why I saved Chloe. I realized that they were only 18 at the time, but what they went through together, I do imagine that it could be a bond for life. That's what I was assuming anyway when I was finishing the first game. And this is exactly what was sort of suggested in Life is Strange 2, because 3 years later they were still together. So what would happen between these 7 years that would lead to us separating? Like I mentioned before, the answer to that question could be strictly technical, but I do feel there are some hints in what we're already told. Max is apparently drawn to empty spaces. She takes photos of empty buildings, abandoned places, which serves as a metaphor for sure for how she feels. Maybe she hasn't actually worked through that trauma. And again, these are two different traumas. The trauma of losing her partner, or the trauma of sacrificing the entire city to save your partner. I do imagine that this could cast a shadow on their relation, and maybe there was some sort of a moment when they needed some time apart, when Max, for example, mentioned that she needs to sort herself out, spend some time alone. That's fine. And if that's what they're going to do, if that's what they're going to sort of tell us, then I would expect for Chloe to show up by the end of the game. If she survived, then I want them to sort of, drive away together. Now, if she died, then it's much easier, not much explaining to do why Chloe isn't there, because she's dead. But it doesn't really relieve the developers of having to sort of explain how it all happened. Now, Deck 9 already tried this sort of narration. They tried navigating trauma, and that happened in the Wavelands DLC. They were sort of trying to explain how the tornado influenced Steph. I actually feel like that DLC was the weakest part of the entire franchise. Then again, Deck 9 also created Farewell, which to me reaches just as high as Life is Strange when level-wise, and it also in a way maneuvers trauma. and the feeling of loss. Now, they did it in an exquisite way, so if they really focus again and if they give this game as much care as we all expect, then maybe this could be a decent game, but they cannot really forget that Max's story cannot be just a stand-alone tale of a girl who has powers and who's trying to sort of solve a murder mystery. Because Max is so much more than that. I believe that Max doesn't really exist separately from what happened in the first game, regardless of what it was. That's why I feel navigating lack of Chloe and not exactly where she is, but how Max is handling her absence might just be the biggest task ahead for Deck 9. And I do hope that they acknowledge that, and I do hope that they respect every single decision that we made in the first Life is Strange game. Like I said before, to me, lack of Chloe implicates two different games and two different protagonists, despite the fact that it's still one Max, the Max that we know, Max Caulfield. However, one who experienced drastically different circumstances. Anyway, I'll be still discussing Life is Strange Double Exposure, and I'm very curious about your thoughts as always. Stay safe, guys. This is Ola from Stop Me O channel. Bye!